Hello, I'm the Smoking Cheddar, but you probably already knew that. So today's video is slightly different. We are discussing the community post that was recently put out there, asking for suggestions in how to deal with whales. Now, specifically turtles, or people sandbagging down from higher tier conquests or L4s or C4s, however you wish to call them, into the lower tiered games and then effectively turtling. So what is it we mean by turtling? Well, my base, if you saw the 2-hour video, is effectively a starter turtle. Yes, I am contributing towards the problem I am now advocating to fix. I am aware of that. And the reason why is because I don't want to see the game fail. I'd rather see my base fail than the game. Now, why is this such an important topic that I would make a separate video on and aim it specifically at the development team in the hopes that they would see this video and the arguments contained therein? Well, if a player base within the game starts to struggle, a specific group within the game starts to struggle, and they start to have less and less fun, eventually they will cease playing. The whole point of a video game is that you use it to relax in your free time, maybe get a little bit competitive or very competitive, but ultimately the goal is to win and to have fun. The problem is when turtles come down or they're extremely costly to remove. Say, I've seen battle reports where turtles are consuming in excess of 7,000 reserves. There are players who will not be able to contend with these effective credit card warriors. I'm sorry, but that is what you become when you start pumping in so much money that you are doing that to other players. If one player can hold off an entire alliance while his teammates build up towards an objective, then the balance of power has shifted greatly in the favour of whoever is paying the most money in order to effectively win. Yes, a pay-to-win mechanic, which for a free-to-play MMO is often a death nail. It's the last one that goes in the coffin. And it's not because people are paying, it's because people start leaving. They start leaving because when they've wasted 7,000 reserves and their war funds go from 100 odd million down to 15 in an afternoon, they can't afford to continue the push. They can maybe move one or two villages, and then that's it. They have to stop and wait a whole day, maybe longer, before they can carry on the fight. In the meantime, the enemies bring up their team, and basically you just get stuck in the safe zone. So I'd like to propose some solutions to this issue, and I'd like to, before I go any further, explain that this is a transaction. Yes, video games, you give the money, your money, to the development team. In exchange, the development team will continue to develop and you have a game to play. And a lot of the solutions are solutions I've heard in other MMOs, and they never work. What if we increase this stat? What if we decrease that stat? What if we introduce this? What if we remove that? It doesn't really work, because in order for it to work, the devs have a tendency, in every single instance I've ever come across in my life, that pendulum moves too far one way. Okay, so we've seen it happen in Warpath as well, where defense was very, very weak, and over the course of several months they've increased the defense stats of bases over the course of the year. Take last September, not September just gone, but the September before of 2023, where we saw a massive update for the walls, and that carried on. And as that carried on, we saw bases become more resistant to damage. And now we're at the stage where a single base can determine whether or not a alliance loses if incorrectly managed. Now, this is also partly down to the players. Anecdotally, I will point out the last L4 we played in, we were up against an entire team of turtles. This wasn't so much of a problem for us because the strategy officer involved deliberately plotted courses which moved around them. And they subsequently spent the rest of the L4 complaining in City Chat that no one was playing with them, that we were scared to fight them. It's not that we were scared to fight them, it's just that we didn't see the point in feeding them 7,000 plus reserves in order just to remove a single base that we could simply move to the left and build around. He can only block a single build at a time, so can his buddies, and there's more of us than our view, so subsequently we can build around you eventually. And that's in fact how we won the game. But it's very important to just say, if your strategy officers aren't doing that, then sitting and throwing units against a base, which is only going to pay for an SOS, you are also contributing towards the problem. Not just me with my videos, but you and your behaviour. So this is a community-based issue. And everyone is enabling it, whether you are participating in the act yourself, whether you are researching ways in order to do it from people like myself, or whether you are miles ahead of me on this one and you're simply paying for the SOSs, or you've paid for all the research boosts, or you've paid for all of the gold and bought your technology and your everything, and you've just scooted all the way to the end. And yes, those people exist. Now, I would like to point out very much, I don't think that should be penalised. But I don't think it should be rewarded either. If you are the sort of person that enjoys playing the game and you would like to play for as little amount as possible, or even free, then there are ways to do that by investing your personal time into playing the game. So, to the point of how we combat this, you might notice Berserker Bear is on the screen behind me. There is already a mechanic in the game. Burning. A debuff that causes a troop to take damage every second. In this instance, you deal 100 damage coefficiency every second for 4 seconds. I propose two things. First of all, as this is a transaction, the devs will only do something like this if they get something out of it, is we introduce a fire suppressant SOS. This is an SOS that you have the option for a limited time to purchase if your base is destroyed by fire or burning damage. I also propose that we change the fire or burning damage to only affect player bases, but we increase it for the amount of damage, we increase the amount of time, more importantly, we stack it. Now, that sounds very overpowered, and it is. But I'd like to reference what I said earlier, with 7,000 casualties. It gets to a point where an army group is beleaguered, it's on its last legs. You're unable to continue. And if that is the case, like I said, you give up. Now, if you can sacrifice an AG of, say, 1.5 to 2,000 units instead of 7,000 units, and watch that base's HP tick down to 0 over the course of, say, 10 minutes, that seems like a fair exchange, and I'll explain why. The whole point of turtling is to increase your stats. Let's be fair. You only do it just so you look good on kill deaths. You only do it so you get advancement in FM rank. There isn't a single player, there is not a single player out there who's doing it for any other reason, and that includes myself. Okay? So don't come into the comment section and say, oh, I don't do that because... No, you don't. You do it because yourself. Just admit it so we can move on. Now, this would be a way in which those defensive players would be satisfied with a large battle report. Admittedly, it's not going to be as large as 7,000, as it's not wave after wave after wave of troops hitting your base. You're still going to gain more than you lose. But in exchange, the attacking force, after a period of time, has removed that base. Now, let's say they pay for that fire suppressant SOS. That's a transaction that the devs are now benefiting from. We know that these whales and these turtles at the top end are spending money on SOSs. So what should be the reason that they get an SOS? Why would they want an SOS over the fire suppressant SOS over the standard one? Well, let's say you buy a fire suppressant SOS. Why not offer the bonus to increased base regeneration, HP regeneration over time, providing no units enter combat? This would incentivize them, if they want to have maximum base HP, to remain in the safe zone outside of combat for an extended period of time, excluding PvE, I'd like to stress. So they can still attack bunkers, they can still do the air paratrooper events and participate in other ways, but if they are engaged by other players, they lose that buff. I think this would be fair. The players that enjoy paying to advance themselves and paying to have access to additional mechanics or paying to have an advantage, whether that be an SOS or in this case a fire suppressant SOS, would still buy. In fact, it may even see a sales increase, which Lilith, you, the developers, would like. In turn, us, the players, get lower casualty reports. We're in the game for a longer period of time, which increases player retention, and it also enables players to actually progress in an L4, making it more combative. Now, this also will have an additional knock-on effect. If an AG of medium size is capable of wiping out every single base within 10 minutes after doing a single attack, we should see an increase in field fighting, as the burning mechanic has been implemented quite heavily. Because if your bases are getting one shot, the only way you're going to stop that is by meeting them head on in the field. And this leads on neatly to another point, which is people were complaining there's not enough field fighting. Well, give them a reason to field fight. At the moment, there is no reason to field fight. In the last L4 I played, was more than happy and willing and able to simply drive around my enemy because they refused to leave their base. Why would they leave their base and lose their units out in the field when we had to come to them to destroy them? I'd like to quote Sun Tzu in that instance, which is, be where the enemy is not. In order for us to win, we had to build around them. We saw very little fighting in the last L4. We're in it for 4 weeks. There's nothing wrong with the gameplay loop. What's wrong at the moment is that certain bases are extremely tough to destroy. Now, how do we do that without directly affecting the lower rank bases? Well, let's be brutally honest. If you're a lower ranked base, or you're a lower tiered base, or you have a lower amount of HP, this burn mechanic's probably not going to affect you very much anyway, as a lot of these turtles, or indeed large base-to-base players, are able to simply walk straight up to your base anyway and wipe you out. So it's not really going to affect you until you reach that level. And once you've reached that level, you've then got to be a bit more aware of your surroundings. I don't think we should be penalising anyone for playing a specific way. Very specifically, I think that's a bad idea. I think what we should be doing is encouraging additional types of gameplay. And we can only encourage additional types of gameplay if people are being retained, if they're staying and they're playing. If you lose 7,000 reserves in about 2 seconds, you're going to just go, had enough of this tonight. Go play Sonic. Because why wouldn't you? It's very, very, very important that the devs understand that sales are directly linked to retention. Take the ad campaign, for example. The ad campaign is advertising a rail shooter that, let's be fair, shouldn't be in the game. It sucks players in on the basis they think they're going to be playing a rail shooter on their phone. This is not a rail shooter. Outside of the mandatory 5 minutes the game wrongfully makes you play at the start, which also needs removing, I might point out, the ad campaign incorrectly reflects what the game actually is. And it isn't until you've spent several hours in the game you actually realise what the game is, which is an MMORTS. The ads need to accurately reflect that, and I do believe they are now starting to change the ads in order to a complaint that's been made specifically around that, and that's great, but they still need to do something about the rail shooter in order to attract new players. Players will leave the player base regardless because they find one thing or another particularly bad, or they don't have time, or they pass, or they find another game to play. We, the players, have the capacity to steer the devs in a direction we want. The way we do that is with our money, because the devs like money. We like entertainment, and the transaction is one of money for entertainment, whether that be through a subscription or packs. Those of us that pay a subscription are effectively making sure that the game remains ad-free for people who wish to remain free to play. And I think that's a very fair trade, personally. But there's a number of other things that are also underutilized, not just this fire mechanic, which could be put to good use just by simply changing a few lines of code. They don't need to add any new artillery officers. They could, in fact, add a versatile officer that adds to the fire mechanic. We've seen a lot of potential in infantry recently, for example. So why not introduce another infantry officer that provides an area of effect shield or random bubbles to, say, 3 random nearby units to help counteract the splash damage artillery from splash damage officers such as Argent Flame or Stinger Fist or Maestro. Why not make that shield as 100 co-efficiency or 150 co-efficiency? Not a lot, but enough to negate 85% of that splash damage or 90% of the splash damage depending on the officer. So these are ways in which Lilith can also benefit, because once they release these sorts of officers, people will want to buy the golden statue packs in order to awaken them faster if they don't have enough statues. We must look as the player base towards Lilith and say, how can we encourage you? We need to tell them what we would be happy to purchase. If you're not happy to purchase anything, that's fine. You don't have to purchase anything. But those of us who do purchase something, we need to tell the devs, hey, I'd like to buy something like this. This will make them listen. This is how we affect change as the player base. Even if you buy just the odd 99p pack, what sort of things would you like in that pack? Tell them. You know, there is a suggestion box in their Discord. Please use it. Say, hey, I'd like to see a 99 cents or a 99 pence pack that does these sorts of things. Can you start doing these more often? These are ways that you can affect the game mechanics as well. Say, I would like to see an officer that does these sorts of things, and I would pay for these statues in turn. And this is how we should appeal to the devs. At the end of the day, this is a free-to-play game, and it does have microtransactions quite heavily involved in the game. In order for the game to survive, we need to retain the players we have and bring new players in and have a higher retention. We're not going to retain new players if the first L4 they get into, big fat boy Jimmy comes down from gold 2 into silver 2 with his 350 million base and 1.2 billion HP on his walls, and sits there and doesn't get destroyed for an entire L4 because he's sitting on a choke point. These things quite desperately need to be addressed, because without the free-to-play players, without that player retention, without the new players coming in, eventually they'll only be left with whales. And the whales will leave if there is no one to play with. There are competitors to this game out there that have started to switch on to a lot of these problems, and they are trying very, very hard to deal with it. And I've tried some of those games, and yeah, they're pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I prefer Warpath, and I'd like to see Warpath continue, because I just think it's a good game. I think this could be the best MMORTS out on the market. But they need to address those sorts of issues. Other issues. We have an entire underutilized tactics tree. You can get like 3% bonus HP, 2% bonus resistance. Once you've gone and got yourself your troop capacity increases, realistically, there's very little in this tree that's worth investing in. Very, very little. We could see player interaction increase by having a point system. What if we had a point system for every 50,000 of contributed damage points that you, a player, has contributed through an army group? So you've donated a unit, you've resupplied that unit when it's been destroyed, and that unit has gone on to damage other units or bases. Once you say reach 50,000 of these contribution points, we then in turn see those contribution points generate a gold crate, which could have a gold blueprint in it, or a gold plus blueprint, or maybe a unit selection, or perhaps a gold statue. Gold statues are a great way to encourage players to do something, because gold statues are so hard to come by for free-to-play players. Adding a daily 99p guaranteed gold statue. Who's not going to buy that at least once, you know? There's quite a few people who's never bought the game, who's sitting on like 100 statues waiting for, tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to play tomorrow because I'm at work, blah, blah, blah. Oh, 99p. I'll have that. So we need to see the burning damage increase, and we could see a buff to that in this tree, for example. There's a lot of things that the devs could do to increase the amount of damage output without penalizing a turtle too heavily. The only way they need to be penalized is not to be rewarded with so many damn kills. And yes, I include myself in that category. I'm not particularly great. I'm not the best silver turtle out there. I am still developing my army, and I'm still developing my base, and this would effectively counter me. And am I mad about that? Not at all, because it means that I too can go on the offensive. We don't need more artillery officers. Artillery is already an oversaturated market for officers. Unless you're running 4 artillery pieces, you're not particularly hard done by. If you're doing like 2, maybe 3, you've got the pick of the litter. 4, you're going to start to struggle a little bit, but even then you have access to the lounge, you've got access to versatile officers, and artillery doesn't really need to be taken into consideration. A helicopter / tank officer or versatile officer that could be employed on infantry that deals burning damage, that would be a good way of doing things. An infantry officer that could counteract the random damage effects of the splash damage officers in a base defense scenario would also be worthwhile. It would be frustrating and potentially reduce the amount of kills that the turtle receives even further, but is that a bad thing if they're not online? I mean, if you're defending your base, that's one thing. If you're online and actively defending it, whether that's through tactics cards or anything else, that's kind of, acceptable if you're able to get a lot of kills. You're actively playing, you're spending time playing that game. But if you're just logging in, dumping $100, logging out, logging in, dumping another $100, and then all of a sudden over the course of a week or 2 weeks, you've got this massive base that can now prevent entire army groups from moving through a small pass in Cairo, effectively winning the game for you, then there is no incentive for anyone to fight you. Ever. And I think the problem is when you start removing the PvP aspect from a PvP game, you're going to have problems with your player base, Lilith. And they're going to come sooner, a lot sooner than you realise. This is a considerable warning. I don't want to see it, but trust me, you guys are going to lose players a lot faster than you're going to gain them. If we look at the player listings, if we look at the server listings, it's saying servers are packed. You can go on to server 56 and not see anyone type a message in world chat for like 2 hours. Or a day sometimes. Or you can go into server 112, same issue. Because you open a new server, you put all the new players in the new server in order to keep them safe from the older players, which is sensible. But at the same time, you're not integrating those servers, so the player base is getting strung out. And if there's no one to play with in an L3, if there's no way to form a team from your L3, then more people will quit. This is another issue that needs to be addressed. You need to compound the amount of servers you've got. You need to forcefully migrate players onto new servers and shut down old ones every 3 to 6 months at least. Allow people to move as an alliance. They can keep their alliance tech, but effectively refresh the servers, because it says that the servers are packed. They're not packed. They're not. Anyone can go into any city in any server between levels 1 and 3 and see how quiet a lot of those cities are. A good 90% of them have got no activity in them at all. Barely got a handful of bases. And that is a quiet sign that people are not playing. Now, when I first started playing 3 years ago, that was not the case. The cities were packed. The world chat was popping off. Everyone was talking. It was a great game. It was fantastic. But over time, people have lost interest, which is fair. This happens. It's the natural cycle of games. But we're not seeing people come into older servers, which means people who are on older servers are subsequently getting less and less people to play with. The group of players you have to choose from is getting smaller and smaller. So I know I can hear the people already in the comments section saying, "Yeah, why don't you just use a migration command?" What? So we can change the same problem for the same problem. You delay it, effectively. We need to have a free server transaction. There doesn't need to be any more servers. We need to be able to migrate between servers for free at specific levels for specific levels. So say if you're like level 1 to 50, you're on like the last 50 servers, and you can move between them completely free. And then when you go up a few levels to say like level 25 to 28 or 20 to 28, the next 50 or the last closest to 050 suddenly become a free migration for you. but you have to pay to migrate within those other servers. This could potentially increase people moving between servers, and it could see a revitalization of a lot of dead servers, and it will also tell you how many players you've actually got left, because a lot of servers will become very, very much ghost town, more so than they are already. This is actually my third attempt at recording this video, because every time I record this video I leave some crucial bit of information out that I later remember. But one of these recordings I got asked a question by a friend on Discord that, while I was recording, I decided to answer because I couldn't be bothered to move my hand to click the off button. I'm going to add that in because on the cuff I answer a few additional things and I explain them slightly differently. So if you haven't understood this so far, don't worry about it. I explain it to my friend in a way that he seemed happy with, and I explained to him why certain things wouldn't work. This isn't just from my opinion, this is from experience of playing multiple types of MMOs. I played lots of MMO games over the years, whether it's been RPGs, RTSs, or simulation MMOs. There's a certain set of things, once they start happening, cascade into a failure. And Lilith are now sitting right on the cusp of one of those happening, which is the potential exodus of player base and not seeing more come in. And the reason for this exodus, potentially, is because of turtling. It is the number one problem in the game, and unless they find a way to completely solve the issue, then the game's over. I don't want that to happen. I quite like the game, and I don't really want to find another RTS to play for the time being. I'm actually quite happy here talking to you guys. Small group of you I have. Thank you for that, by the way. So, yeah. I'll add that in. What's the idea, quick?
So, you know, you're doing Hegemon,
Uh-huh.
where in the center you control your troops.
Uh-huh.
Why can't they do that with something like in the level 4s, where it brings the players out of the base with the units to then proceed?
How are they going to monetize it?
The same as Hegemon, so you'd bring your
No.
you take control
How are they going to earn money from it as a company?
by retaining the player base.
Player base retention only. So transactionally, as long as people are buying packs, they will seek to sell you another pack.
But
If they move to a subscription-based service only, then this would be something that they could address. But so what is it you would like me to suggest specifically?
well, I'll put it into your words because you're better at wording things. But turtles are a big issue.
Yeah.
Credit cards are a big issue.
Yeah.
But if you say you've got a big whale on the other team, or two big whales, they're bringing their troops into an AG,
Mm-hmm.
but your guys have got more AGs or whatever, so you can flood that, target their troops first to get rid of them, and then whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You've got more of a chance than you have taken out the base. But then, so you your troops then win that fight. You keep your troops inside that village for certain period, and then you can then capture it and then build on from that. So it just brings.
So treat each village as like it was a hegemon, effectively.
Yeah, but not. It doesn't be every village, but like
But
at
if
certain
you
points in the map. So it brings players out, and it brings AGs can then. Do you know what I mean?
That's actually a pretty good idea. I'm not going to lie, it doesn't fit with the video, but it is a very good idea because it would allow you to effectively break a deadlock through
Yeah.
deliberate PvP action. That's a good idea. I will consider putting that into the video. But the problem is the video is all about how we can monetize a specific mechanic because
Right.
they're more likely to respond as a company to having an opportunity to sell you something than to make the life of the player base easier.
Yeah.
So the reason why the ad campaign has the change to the ad campaign was successful was because I pointed out that the type of people they're trying to sell packs to are the type of people who want to play first-person shooters. The type of people who are playing the game, the type of people who want to play real-time strategies. These two markets do coexist, but they are not. They also exist independently. So you take yourself, for example, you play Call of Duty, but you don't come to Warpath to play Call of Duty. You come to Warpath to play effectively an MMO version of Command and Conquer.
Yeah.
And once they realize that, they have started to change that. So they need to. So in that term, they are wasting money on an ad campaign that is providing them with a player base that does not want to play their game. And because that player base does not want to play that game, that player base is not going to spend any money. So correcting that changes that issue. Now, the issue you have is the game is already in play. So these are people who are already playing the game. And it's a game mechanic issue. So people aren't going to leave the game on the basis of a poor game mechanic. They're going to more likely to leave the game when the game constantly fails them. So the best way for the devs to capitalize on this in this instance would be to monetize something like the SOS, but to aim it towards a mechanic that's already in the game, which can be increased to counter that type of gameplay. So this way they've got a monetization of a mechanic that's already in use without actually having to alter anything that's in the game. They haven't got to add a whole new set of mechanics or a whole new set of rules in order to execute that specific situation. So the situation you're talking about would be to basically create an arena within an arena to determine who wins.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea, but the problem is what you're saying to them is, hey, if you create another game within the game while the game is being played, we don't want to buy anything, we just want to do this. They're going to look at it and go, well, that's a lot of work for nothing. That's how they will view it. And I think this is what a lot of the player base has misunderstood. The things that will get changed are the things that will affect them financially. The things that we should be asking them is not, hey, can you change this? This is bad. It's, hey, what can we buy from you in order to make the change? Okay, that's the question we need to be asking as the player base. Whether we purchase those packs or not is irrelevant. Someone will. We know people buy the SOS packs. We know we've seen them buy 5 or 6 of them in a week. You know, we know the sort of players that will buy these SOS packs. So what I'm proposing is we increase the fire damage that is in the game to the point where a 3,000 point strong AG can wipe out a 3 million point base. And the damage over time will do the job and destroy the base. The turtle gets his 3,000 kills, the base gets removed. He can then choose to buy an SOS. So it's a transaction. And if he comes back, he's now got to come back at half strength, and we're just going to do it to him again. and then he's going to buy another one, and we're just going to do it to him again, which is better than doing him for 3,000, going back to do him for another 3,000, then going back a third time to wipe him out for 1,500, and then him come back and the whole thing start all over again. The transaction there is unfair, it's lopsided, because he's not exhausting a financial resource outside of the game fast enough for the player base he's fighting to counteract. It needs to be quick and decisive for both parties in order for it to work. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I should leave that section in the video. Me explaining to you what I mean. In fact, I might do that. So, I've been the Smoking Cheddar and you've been very patient, and this is the actual end of the video.